Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
I'm Sean Bobbitt. You're listening to Monday Morning Critic Podcast.
So there is so much to your life, right? So, especially early on, because I feel like lately with guests, there's been a lot of back and forth. Some of my guests, Japan and back to the U.S. In your case, you're born in Texas, right? And you're there till about 6 years old. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'd say I primarily lived in England since then.
Right.
But also have spent a lot of time, as a child in Saudi Arabia, as an adult, a lot of time in the Middle East, and several years in Russia. A lot of jobs in the African subcontinent. It's a lot of moving around.
Now, the reason for the bouncing around early on, where it wasn't your decision, is that something related to dad or mom? Is how did?
Yeah, my father was in the oil industry.
Okay, that makes
sense. So it was Aramco in Saudi Arabia. He was sent there. He was working for Esso as a geophysicist, and went to Aramco, and then from Aramco we moved to England during the North Sea oil boom in the 70s.
Did you find that moving around? Because I know some people have had the same experience where they're resentful of it because they never established roots. But did you find yourself better off for that? Did you find yourself more, I guess, worldly is a word I'd use?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's sadly so many Americans never leave America.
Yeah.
Sure. And really don't have a great sense of the world. And what a big place it is and how much goes on outside of it. So I think it was a blessing, to go from, Corpus Christi, Texas to then travel the world has been a great privilege. And I'm very much a defining part of my life.
Yeah. And there's the way you're, early on, you're blown away by, I think it was Lawrence of Arabia. I heard you saying in another interview. And then you kind of get involved with your dad's 35 millimeter camera. Did you find that they were connected? Your love of being moved by that, movie and wanting that for yourself?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I never meant to be a cinematographer.
Right.
And in fact, in my early teens, I had very good friends who were, school friends who were really good photographers.
Right.
And, I just hung out with them and learned photography. But I was a very poor photographer. I mean,
right.
when they think about me now, they just can't understand how this has possibly happened.
Yeah.
But, it's like any skill. It takes time. And, I've been, a paid cameraman for over 40 years. And you hope after 40 years that you've kind of mastered the basics of a skill. And, cinematography is something, it never ends.
Right. I'm starting to think you might have a future in the business, but I'm being overly optimistic.
I don't know. I still consider myself, pretty much a newcomer in the feature film world.
So I've heard you in other interviews describe two moments in your life, and I was curious to ask you which you thought was the most. Most of this interview is positive, and this is positive too. But which you thought had a bigger negative impact on your life? A show called The Bill, or Saturday Night at the Movies? Which one? I feel like Saturday Night at the Movies kind of sparked a I don't know. I feel like that serves you better in the long run. I feel like from the experiences on that.
The two of them are inexorably linked together.
Right.
Because it was being, sort of being fired off of Saturday Night at the Movies that got me to Rockport, Maine.
Right.
To do a week-long seminar with Billy Williams, which was an incredibly transitional moment, because Billy, such a great teacher and such an open, just an open, warm person who so loves cinematography. He was able to connect so many technical things, plus at the same time imbue this understanding that there is actually an aesthetic associated with it.
Right.
That it's not just a technical endeavor. That you still have to, through that technology and the mastering of those skills, tell a story. And that really, sort of opened my eyes. Plus the fact he was able to say, the fact that I had been fired off a show was simply a rite of passage, and not something to be overly concerned about.
Yeah, and that week changed your life forever, right? You look at it that way, I think.
One of many weeks.
Right.
There are these in everyone's life, doors open and close, and you either step through or they're slammed in your face, or you decide not to go through them, and all those decisions
Yeah.
ultimately determine where you end up.
Yeah, I was watching that wonderful masterclass you did, and when you got to that point, you were very, it was clear that one of many, but definitely one that certainly struck a chord with you.
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, I really didn't know what a cinematographer was.
Right.
Honestly, even though I've been a cameraman for almost 20 years at that point, and suddenly it all things made sense. And I knew then what I wanted to be, because up to that point I was still thinking, well, I'll be a cameraman, but really deep down inside, I'm a writer director.
Right, philosopher possibly too. You're a big philosopher. No, but you study it. That's important, right? You don't lose that, right?
Well, no, and I think it that has to do with more of having an open mind to ideas,
right,
than any specific philosophical idea itself.
Which, as a cinematographer, Sean, for those listening, is enormous, right? You can't. I mean, first you have to be willing to be on the same page as the director. I mean, you have to have that skill and that ability. So that does serve you well to where you are now, I believe.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
But I think even more than important than that experience was, as a child, I was very shy, and I still am very shy. I just pretend to be a cinematographer.
Yeah.
So I read a lot, and just read and read and read, and wrote, and sort of had a basic understanding of story and structure, and what a good story is.
Right.
I think that has always held me in good stead, because it's storytelling. What we're doing is storytelling, but in a visual way as opposed to a written way. And it's reached the point now where I can't write at all. I see a blank piece of paper and I'm terrified, because so much of my life has been focused into the purely visual. That whatever skills I had developed in my youth in terms of writing have been, it's overwhelmed.
Right. We mentioned Lawrence of Arabia, right? And why did that? So I was doing research on your life. I stumbled on. I always bring up Christopher Nolan because I feel like he's just so interesting in how he views camera work, how he views how things should be shot. I think it's, whether you agree with him or not, I just think it's genius how he puts so much time into it. He invests so much time into it. And you both referenced Lawrence of Arabia. Why is it so meaningful for you?
Well, I think it was the first film that I saw that was truly epic. That it was storytelling on the same level that I would create in my own mind in reading a book.
Right.
And it is just such a, there's so much involved in it. I had no idea about cinematography as I was watching it, and had no interest in cinematography
right.
At the time. I'd never even touched a camera at that point. I was probably, 10 years old.
Right.
But there was something about it that was captivating. Also, the fact that I lived in Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
It was like there were things there that touched and meant something more.
Right.
Than say if I was still in Texas, I would never have seen it.
Right.
And it wouldn't have meant anything to me because I had no idea what Saudi Arabia even was.
Right.
So it didn't spark in me a desire to get into films or to be a cinematographer. It just created within me an awe of that film and the possibility of film
Right.
that has always stuck in my mind.
Yeah, certainly, movies have that way, and in your case, clearly, I don't want to say paid off, but clearly stuck with you the entire way. And you've probably been asked this a million times, but I'm always curious when I talk to cinematographers what their view is on this. So, as I mentioned, Nolan's very passionate about digital versus film. I think his quote was something to the effect that when you go to a museum, you want to see a painting versus a picture of a painting. I think that was his point with film versus digital, and it's a good point. But I don't know that I see digital. I don't want to say as negatively as he does. I mean, I see he's passionate about film being shot. But what is your take on that? Is that just one person's style? Is it universally thought of that way? Is it philosophy? What is that,
No,
Sean?
this discussion has been going on since the first Sony high def camera came out, and
Right.
was used to shoot some truly third rate images,
Right.
and was touted as being the future and better and everything else. And I've always been very cynical about that. I'd prefer to shoot film if I could. I am a little bit resentful that I have to shoot digitally, because I worked many years to master film,
Right.
and then
Right.
suddenly it's taken away from me.
Mm,
It's like, it's a very, very powerful storytelling medium. It has it, and up to now, up to very recently, the quality of well exposed 35 mil film, properly processed, and with a digital intermediate, you could not beat the quality.
right.
There are digital films now, or digital cameras that have come out that are as good in their own way. But there is one fundamental difference that, for me, I find periodically distressing, and that is that what you're seeing on the screen and what everyone else is seeing on the screen, um, people believe to be the image,
Right.
but
Right.
it's not. It's a proxy of the image. And you can look at an image, because the actual cameras are much faster. They work much better in low light, so you can create an image with just available light and think, oh, that's acceptable. And what's happening is that the imagination as a cinematography is being taken away from you by the screen itself. Because if you're not careful, and it's very difficult not to, you're sort of you're lighting from the screen, you're composing from the screen.
Right.
Whereas on film, you have to imagine what it will be. You have to create the image in your own mind. And I think that it requires a, a higher level of skill in some ways, a higher level of imagination, but also an openness to experiment, to take risks.
Right.
You don't know. You hope you know what it's going to turn into, but you don't know till the report comes back the next day. If it's simply there in front of you, there's no mystery to that. There are no risks there.
Right.
I find it is a potentially very dull, because your imagination is no longer being stimulated through mostly fear,
Right. Right.
sort of
Right.
constructive fear about, well, I could really fuck this up now if I do this. But then again, if I do this, this could be really great.
Yeah.
And if you're getting that immediate response on a proxy image on a monitor, it's something very different. And it also, by the time you get to the grade, if you're not very careful, and if you have to be, I think, quite clever and quite skillful how you manage the rushes and the onset monitoring, because quite often, the images themselves are not found, are not locked in till you get to the grade.
Right.
And it's in the grade that the film is put together. But again, you have this problem where, the director and the producers and everyone else and the editor are watching these images for months on end, and they fall in love with them. And those images aren't exactly what could potentially be the film. And
Right.
so, you can find yourself in a battle in the grade, trying to make the film better and make the film what it should be. Because, for example, I shoot for the grade. So I take shortcuts. I do whatever I can to get the day done. And a lot of that quite often is compromises I make on the day within the visuals, knowing that I can come back in the grade and I can change this, I can change that, and I can change this.
Right.
If I can save 20 minutes by not doing it on the day and spending 2 minutes doing it in the grade, then that's another shot.
Right.
On the day. So it's a very important process. But that only works then if when you get to the grade, people let you do what you had planned,
Right.
are even conscious of the fact that you are shooting for the grade, and that what they're seeing as they go through the edit is not a final image. It is a proxy, an approximation. It's a possibility of what the image can be.
Right.
There's also, the beauty, and I love the digital grading systems, because you work with the director to create a look to a film. You interpret their vision as best you possibly can, and the things change as they get into an edit, and things change on the day when you get into a scene where your lead actor, instead of seeing a scene as a scene of high drama, suddenly sees it as a comedic scene, and everything is changed from that point on. Yet you've lit it for a high drama scene.
Right. Right.
So when you get to the grade, you have the leeway to go through and zhuzh it,
Right. Right.
to
Right.
adapt it so that it is now correct for the emotional content of the scene itself. And if you're not allowed to do that, and like I say, I do very specific things. No one knows what those things are, because I don't say to the director, I put a note to the editor, I'm leaving that bright wall, untouched, because I'm going to come into the grade and I'm going to knock it down 2.5 stops so that it pulls out the foreground and doesn't blur the background.
Right.
But I know I'm going to do that, and I know it's going to make a better shot. So,
Right.
and that sort of thing, when you have film, people look at the rushes and immediately, the rushes aren't great anyway, because they're usually, a one light or a best light rush. So they look forward to the grade to change things.
Right. Right.
All of the sort of I wouldn't call it propaganda, but there's a certain amount of that that's gone into the selling of digital. One of the things is, what you see is what you get. So, which is, is a huge misuse of the old digital process.
Right. Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And, I was thinking that many actors have been given the freedom to either ad lib or improvise. Do you, as a cinematographer, have that same leeway, whether it's keeping the camera going just that little bit longer than planned, or maybe deciding from using film to digital? I guess that's a much bigger decision, but how much input do you have, or does it vary on projects? Does it vary on directors? Does it vary on all the intangibles? How does that work, Sean?
At the end of the day, my job is to take the ideas of the director and to realize them in a visual format, whether it's film or whether it's tape.
Right.
And I do that to the best of my ability. Every director is different. In the same way that every cinematographer is different, every actor is different. We perceive things in different ways. Um, but if you can get into the director's head and create that world for them, then you're doing your job. And ultimately, come back to this whole thing about format. It doesn't matter at the end of the day what you shoot on, whether it's film or whether it's tape. It's really, or digital, sorry. At the end of the day, the audience decide
Right.
whether they
Right.
like the film or not.
Right.
And they could care less about this endless discussion that we've had for decades now. If
Right.
it's a good film, it's a good film, whether it's shot on an iPhone or whether it's shot on IMAX. You do try to get the correct format for the story itself to enhance the storytelling. But ultimately, it's about story and performance. That's all people care about.
Right. Right. Right.
Is simply it's a medium by which we tell that story.
Right, right. And I want to say for years that you were a cameraman. How much do you feel that experience has played into where you are now? And I think part of your camera work included going to like war torn areas, and I think there was a stint in San Francisco. So I mean, and I think you've said before, and I hope I'm quoting you correctly. Like even as maybe I even said it today, even as a cameraman, you didn't properly realize what a cinematographer's job really truly was. So what have you taken with you in that extensive experience as a cameraman with you to what you're currently doing today?
Everything.
Yeah.
We're a sum of particularly as you develop a skill, you're a sum of all the experiences based around that skill.
Right. Right. Right.
So, I think through the news, you learn about speed, accuracy, composition, and very precise, simple storytelling. You have to find the visuals that are going to tell a very complex story in under a minute. And quite often you have under a minute to acquire those images.
Right. Right.
So everything's got to be right. And you learn, about available light. You learn about, whether it's natural or whether it's man-made, how it works, where it works. Every day that you're filming is in a news or documentary situation, you're being presented to unique lighting situations.
Right.
So over time, you start to hopefully start to learn and understand about the quality of light, the color of light, the direction and the intensity of the light. And sort of, I'd always tried to store away those ideas so that every time I came into a similar situation, I knew how to deal with it. I knew what settings to put onto the camera. I knew, where to put the camera in relation to that light to get the best result.
Right.
And that takes time and experience. And, the more time that you have behind a camera, going to the more different situations, the more possibilities of places and the more chance you have to learn and also to make mistakes.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the thing about, news, quite often they just send you out and they're happy to see you alive at the end of the day. You have some images,
Yeah.
much the better.
Yeah. Yeah.
The images are crap if they're dramatic.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Because
Right.
again, it's the story. So, that was, I think that's invaluable in
Right.
terms of developing my skill set. 20 years of being a news and documentary cameraman, you learn a lot. And of course, that's the basis of the skills that you then take forward with you. And a lot of it has nothing to do with cinematography.
Right. Right.
So we talk about cinematography and we think about cameras, lighting, and movement. As a cinematographer, it's so much more. You're a head of department, you have a team. There's things about leadership, there are things about dealing with people, things about negotiating, just how do you organize yourself? How do you organize your day? What is your demeanor, on the set? These things are as crucial, if not more so sometimes, than what skills you have as a cinematographer.
Right. No, that's well said. And there's two names I wanted to throw at you, both in different ways. One certainly has impacted your life. The other is just kind of a general question. In layman's terms, what makes Roger Deakins so iconic? What is it about? I mean, and there's many, many, many fantastic cinematographers, and I'm talking to one of them right now. But what is why is he so highly regarded? What about him is not that it's different, but is it because he's been doing it over a long period of time? Is it, how would you describe it, Sean?
Well, Roger is just brilliant. You
Right.
look at the consistency of the imagery over his long career. He's a great, great, legendary cinematographer.
Right.
His storytelling ability through his use of the camera and composition and movement is always spot on. It always is there to move the story forward. It always complements the storytelling. And he does that over whatever genre is put in front of him. I mean, it's just a consistency of beauty, imagination, and just a natural storytelling that is unique.
Right. No.
You know, and he never fails
Right.
to completely beguile us with his imagery,
Right.
regardless of what genre it is. I mean, even in animation, Rango is just it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what makes him unique, I think.
Yeah. That's a great answer.
But also who he is.
Right.
I mean, he is he's a consummate photographer as well. And when he's not filmmaking, he's out taking photographs, and he's taking beautiful photographs. And the image isn't, I wouldn't say an obsession, but it probably is an obsession.
Right.
It's something within which he finds comfort and understanding and joy. And who doesn't want to do a job that gives you all those things?
Right. It sounds like he lives and he breathes it, Sean. Right. Even when he's not working, he's still doing it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other name.
Look at his podcasts as well.
Yes.
We're just fascinated by the process of it.
Right.
And always searching to understand more. And I think it's also that searching is such a crucial thing for any cinematographer. And Roger's never going to be bored on a job,
Right.
because he's always going to find something new, something different, something in there, in the story or in the image, to move himself forward as well as the film.
Oh, that's a great answer. And the other name I wanted to ask you about, it's much closer to you, another excellent cinematographer, and I know you think you hold him in high regard, and that's Barry Ackroyd. Yeah. I mean, he presented opportunities to you. Is that kind of, Sean? Is that?
Well, Barry, as I was in the documentary world, Barry transitioned into the feature film world,
Right.
and now it's quite a common thing for people to come out of documentaries into features. At the time, there were a few people, but no one who was sort of just a contemporary of mine, although way up the food chain than I was at the time. And so I always looked up to him. And, of course, the quality of his work as a documentary cameraman, but then also as a cinematographer. And his openness and, just approachability. He's one of those people who he's how do you even describe Barry? He's just a great guy.
Yeah.
And he helped me so dramatically in so many ways. I mean, he got me into to do some second unit, very short period of second unit stuff on Flight 93, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then he had a job in France, a French film called Embrassez que vous voudrez, with the director Michel Blanc, that he couldn't do. And he recommended me to Michel, and Michel gave me the job.
Wow.
And, the opportunity to make a film in a foreign language in France with, you know, a top director and an amazing ensemble French cast was a unique thing. I mean, what a gift.
Right.
And he gave that so willingly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I just love him for that. But also, you know, from my point of view, he paved a way. He showed a route whereby I could get out of the documentary world that I had, you know, I was becoming a bit bored with,
Yeah.
and into the world of features, which, you know, oh, who was I just talking about? I did the
You're,
seminar with, which, um,
you were talking about Barry, and then he offered up your name to for the French film, and
yeah, but it's, you know, my mind was opened up to the possibility of moving out of documentaries into cinematography by the cinematography seminar that I
Right.
did with I've just gone blank on his name.
That's okay.
That's about it. And that's sadly is one of my greatest downfalls is that I forget people's names, and usually it's an actor's name, and usually it's at a really embarrassing moment in time
Yeah.
after I've been working with them for several months and in a discussion on a setup of a shot, I can't remember their name, and I just look at them blankly, and they know full well that I've forgotten their name, and it is deeply.
It happens. It happens. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you was when it comes to Steve McQueen, it's just such a visionary. It's 4 major projects you guys have worked together, and then it was 2 or 3 other smaller projects. Is my math right there, Sean?
Yeah, it was more than 3 others. I mean, I met Steve as a visual artist,
Okay,
and the first jobs I did with him were art installations.
gotcha.
And you know, they are unique things, and they are bona fide works of art. I would highly recommend anyone to go and see Steve's early work because you know, art installations are an odd thing. And the first time I met him, I wasn't quite sure even what he was talking about. When he was talking about an art installation, I'd never really seen one in my life.
Right.
And so the first one I did with him was a thing called Western Deep, which is basically down the deepest gold mine in the world in South Africa. And what he was able to do with the images that we were sort of presented with there is to create something whereby as you watch it, you can not be emotionally moved by it. And everyone in a uniquely different way. And by the combination of the images and the sounds in this gold mine and in the surrounds of this gold mine, he creates something that is transformative. And you can't really say why, but you can't deny it.
Right.
And to me, that's what art is.
Right. Right.
It's something that touches you in a way that maybe you could never truly understand, but cannot deny that it has touched you. And maybe you don't understand what it means, or maybe it sparks off an intellectual exploration of your own, or just a pure, simple emotion. And that's what Steve does. And that's a unique skill that, you know, from that first day we worked together. And again, you talk about those transformative minutes, you know, down in the depths of that gold mine. That changed me forever.
Yeah, yeah, and Sean, didn't it change? Like, and we'll get into 12 Years a Slave, which is one of the most iconic movies I've ever seen, as far as the way it's shot, and I want to get to that in a moment. But didn't one of the experiences in those mines result in one of the more iconic shots, maybe not even in 12 Years a Slave, maybe in recent memory, of Chiwetel being hanged, where people were just walking by him, not acknowledging him. The same thing in The Mines, where people were not looking up. Were those moments connected?
No, not at all.
Okay,
You
all
know,
right.
The Chiwetel hanging and those longer shots is actually something that Steve had in one of his earlier installations
Okay.
that I wasn't party to, had discovered that by presenting an image on a screen, particularly an image surrounded with some sort of distress or some sort of violence, if you hold that image and hold that image and hold that image, the audience, first off, can't escape. But then, secondly, the audience starts to project into that image. And the horror that is there is generally compounded by that projection. So you pull people in by not putting an edit in. An edit subconsciously reminds people this is a film. If there's no edit to give them that escape from the horror, then they're left there with it.
Right. Okay.
And they have to deal with it. And that's something that Steve had discovered in an art installation, which was quite unique. When I saw it again, it was so simple. It's a photograph projected on a screen above and behind someone, bald head, and it's there. It's just a static photograph, and you have a voice talking
right
about an incident, and as you're listening to the voice, you realize it's someone who's talking about accidentally shooting his own cousin. And so, and it's told, and it's about 20 minutes long. So you're staring there, you have nothing to see but this image from above and behind. And over time, you start to realize there's this scar that runs across the back of the skull, and it's never explained. But it becomes part of that narrative. And then as you realize the horror of what the story is, you're projecting that horror onto this person and thinking, oh my God, what's this person been through? But also then your mind starts to play with things. You swear about 10 or 15 minutes in that there's a slow zoom in on the back of the head, but there isn't.
Right.
These are things that you're all projecting. And so, sort of based upon that, it was really in Hunger, the beating of Bobby Sands, where there's that long shot that goes through the whole of the prison as he's beaten by the guards and dragged through and thrown down. The fact that there are no edits, so dramatically increases the horror of that sequence. And also in that film, of course, the long take, the discussion of Bobby Sands and the priest, which, it's 16 and a half minutes of continuous one shot. And again, the audience isn't let go. You're drawn in to these very compelling characters telling these stories and kind of fencing around each other. And again, there's no edit, so you have no escape. So the emotion of the tale builds and builds and builds. And so that's something, it's sort of almost become a technique. And it's a very useful technique, particularly, it was as we get on to 12 Years a Slave, the beating of Patsy.
Yeah.
Again, you see that being used.
Yeah, it sure is, and as you can see from my background, I love 12 Years a Slave, and it's a strange thing for me with this movie because it's such a difficult movie to watch. But there are days where I'm rewatching movies. It's a couple of days a month where I'm rewatching my favorite movies. This movie is so impeccably shot. It's one of the most beautiful. I say this for some movies where I could just turn off the volume and just watch the movie. I'm not talking about the acts of violence and the acts of racism. I'm just saying the way the backgrounds, the imagery, it's just so beautifully done. It's so effective when it comes to showing emotion. I mean, I can watch the last 20 minutes where Chiwetel is trying to tell Brad Pitt at the time who he really is. You know, this is who I am. And the discussion that they're having, it's so powerful. And then from there on in to where he finally meets his family, it's like I'm sobbing by that time. And it's one of my all-time favorites, Sean. And a big reason for that is certainly your work.
Well, thank you for saying that. But it's, you know, my work is only, it's the product of everyone else's work. You know, all that beauty, all those amazing places, you know, their location managers, you know, and of course there's Steve.
Yes, of course.
And the idea of 12 Years a Slave had been in Steve's head for years and years. And it was something that was bubbling through his brain. And, you know, it took a long time to come to fruition. But it was something that he had spoken to me about for several years in advance. And I'd read the book and was, you know, the book that it's based upon, and was very well aware of the story. And, you know, we spent a lot of time talking, and just talking and talking and talking, and talking about the approach. And, you know, primarily that visually, the whole film is about simplicity.
Right.
You know, it's letting the location and more importantly, the actors tell the story. And it's, you know, it's also one of my great kind of peeves as a cinematographer, and of course I would say this because I am a cinematographer. Quite often it's the words that dominate a film, and because the way films are scheduled, the scheduling is all based on the words. So, you know, quite often those sort of beauty elements, the random elements, you simply don't have time to do them within the schedule itself. And, you know, fortunately, as they were going through the edit, and of course, you know, Joe Walker has a lot to do with this as well, because the editor is crucial.
Right.
I mean, and it's so, you know, the designer, the costumes, hair and makeup, you know, the colorists, you know, Tom Poole. There's so many things that go together to create that image, and at the top of it all is Steve helming it.
Right.
I can remember I set up a very fancy shot, and it was like, well, do we really need that? And it's like, no, we don't. Actually, a simple pan told the story even better.
Right.
And so it is that collaboration between everyone, and also, you know, the actors.
Right.
That really, and also don't forget the music.
I was just going to ask you, stole my next question.
Is, you know, that you can have a good image made great.
You just stole my question. Yes. I was going to ask you, does Hans Zimmer's work impact the cinematography, right? Does it impact the movie?
Absolutely. And of course that comes after. So he's responding to the emotion, to the images and everything else. But again, there's a simplicity.
Yeah.
In all of that.
Yeah.
Which you know, I'm fortunate in my life. I've been party to a number of films where all of those things come together.
Yeah.
You know, every disparate element comes in and it works. And that's a rare thing.
Yeah. And I'll say this, and I never get, you know, this person should have won an award. A lot of people should have won, but Chiwetel, it's the biggest snub. I mean, with all due respect to Matthew McConaughey, who was fantastic that year, Chiwetel put on a performance of 2 lifetimes, never mind 1. And you talk about simplicity, and I've read you saying things and Steve saying things where many times his best moments were just the simplest ones, where he would be gazing in a distance, and you're like, wow. I mean, it just speaks volumes, right? Is that correct, Sean?
Absolutely. You know, and that's what I was saying. That, you know, sometimes words get in the way. And, you know, an actor just acting can tell you more in a single shot than a paragraph of dialogue will ever tell.
Right.
And it also by making the audience work for it, by making them invest their own emotions in it and figuring out what's going on
Right.
is what pulls an audience in. That's what engages an audience. If you just simply explain everything to them all the time, then they don't have to be engaged. They just sit back and it flows over them. You don't
Right.
want people sitting back in their seats. You want them sitting forward on their edges of the seats,
Right. Right.
figuring it out. Because we're incredibly sophisticated creatures now visually.
Yeah.
We've all seen so many films and so many TV shows and so many, we understand visual language subconsciously in a so much more sophisticated way that you don't need quite often so much explanation to a scene or to a character's emotion, particularly if you have an actor like Chiwetel.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the what it took from him physically was, such respect, because he just was drained every day, and to live that life, it is remarkable, and it's a shame that he wasn't recognized in the way he should have been.
He should have. And I'm not just saying this because we're speaking. I've said it on numerous podcasts. It's one of the bigger snubs I can remember. My next question to you is certainly as a cinematographer, but as a member of the set. And I get it's a movie. I get people are acting, but Michael Fassbender he might be one of the more evil characters, right? His character, one of the more evil characters in recent memory, right? How does he turn it on and turn it off? Like, how does he go from this like raging? I get it's great acting. I understand that part, but from this like raging, essentially lunatic, to like stop, cut, and like, what is it like that reaction afterwards? What is it like when? I mean, you were on the set. What is that like? We don't get to see that. I mean, obviously. So, what's the best way you can describe it? Is it awkward? Is it something as a professional, as an actor, you just kind of tune yourself? I can't imagine what that environment looked like, Sean. It's an awkward question, but
Well, I think, at university, I failed 2 courses. One of them was theater lighting, and the other one was acting. So to ask me about acting, I'm the wrong person.
gotcha.
I'm in awe of these great actors and what they do. All I know is that it comes from inside of them,
Yeah.
and sometimes it creates great distress. And they reach deep into a truth that most people want to hide, and yet they expose it to the whole world, and they open themselves up to to making immense mistakes and huge embarrassment. And I always feel like they're walking on this tightrope, and it's a very thin tightrope, and they're just grasping onto something. There's something that they have discovered inside of them that is that character,
Right.
and they
Right.
are that person. They are that thing at that moment in time. As horrific as it might be, as difficult as it might be to do that, and quite often by the end of it, they are spent. But then on other times they'll do this most amazing performance, and then on cut, they revert back to who they are.
Right. Right.
And it's
Gotcha.
a laugh or a joke or something else. I think it's one of the greatest privileges as a cinematographer, but also as a camera operator,
Yeah.
to be in close proximity to these great people as they're doing amazing work. And that, is something that it's a unique thing to be party to and to be part of. And as such, I treat it with immense respect.
Right. Right.
And all actors with immense respect, because I can't do what they do, and I don't understand how they do it.
Yeah, but what you can do, a lot of people, many people, most cannot do. And are there times, and I get that you're a professional, but are there times? I mean, you have a front row seat and you're doing your job. I get that. Have you ever lost yourself with Chiwetel or other projects where you're like, I mean, beside you, because you're seeing some of the world's most unbelievably talented, gifted performers that have ever existed. I mean, have you ever lost yourself in a sense that, like, my goodness, that was just phenomenal? I mean, is it
Oh,
tough to make? It's a bit of a balance, I would think.
well, it's part of the. If you have the skills of an operator, then and for me, operating is a wonderful thing. I love to operate simply because it engages me in the whole making of the film in a
Right.
uniquely personal way, and so I am party to those moments. But I can feel, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Oh, that's
I'm,
awesome.
I'm
Yeah.
totally and completely engaged with what they're doing because part of what I love and a lot of the work that I do is the unexpected, what an actor is going to do. You rehearse and you rehearse, but then within the moment, the actor might do something completely different. And as the operator, you have to be there, tuned to respond immediately to what it is,
Right. Right.
especially when you're holding it into a close up. And so I am totally and completely engaged, not just with the image on the screen, but what the actor is doing, what the actor is saying. And totally, um, I've cried. All of these things. A performance, the emotion of a performance. If that stops washing over me and making me, just sort of tingle and or fearful or having an effect on me, then I should
Yeah.
stop doing what I do
Mm.
because I think it's an absolutely crucial to have that level of engagement and to try and have as high a level of understanding about what the actor is doing and try and possibly with the best of them, it's impossible to anticipate what they're going to do.
Right. Right.
And that's a lot of the pleasure of the job is you go to work, you've read the script, you know the words, you know the location, you have a rough idea of what people might do, but what they actually do on the day and how they do it is forever fascinating.
Yeah, that is so well said. And for those listening, your body of work, 12 Years a Slave, Shame, Place Beyond the Pines, another phenomenally shot movie. Old Boy, I love the way that looked. Stronger, The Courier, just on and on. The last one I wanted to end the interview with is The Marvels, and I know there's not much you can say about this.
Yeah.
It's kind of the Captain Marvel Part 2. It's also Avengers Endgame. There's a lot going on here. How does it feel to be a part of the Marvel universe, Sean? Is that because there's a lot of people lately? I feel like many of the old school directors, not even old school directors, even Denis Villeneuve said something recently. So I feel like they don't really understand the concept of these superhero movies, right? They just it's bad mouthing in any way. It just doesn't. I don't understand it because I feel like a good story is a good story, whether that person wears a cape or that person wears a tuxedo. It doesn't matter, Um,
Yeah.
you must be so. I mean, this is a huge project, like enormous for those listening, and obviously you know that. How does it feel to be a part of that universe for you, Sean?
Well, for years and years, I've put off doing the sort of the CGI superhero movies, um, for a number of reasons. They just didn't feel right.
Right,
I haven't, been a great fan of the genre simply because I think I'm of the wrong age and from the wrong place.
right,
Um, but I'm cognizant of the fact that more people watch these films and get immense pleasure from them than almost any other genre around right now. And this is entertainment, what we do, and Marvel have come across something that is fair. It's universal around the world. Millions of people anticipate, you know, almost madly these films and what's going to happen in them, and they need to know, and they're absolutely, immersed into the Marvel universe, and as such, I think it's probably the most successful franchise, although I don't think you could even call it a franchise in cinema history. When you look at the number of eyes who have watched these films over what is a relatively short period of time in the history of cinema, it's phenomenal.
Right.
And as such, you can't deny it, as being something of value. So when I was offered the opportunity, it suddenly it made sense to me.
Right.
And also, having known Nia DaCosta, the
Great
director,
director. Yeah. Great director.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and to me, the a lot of the film is about the director,
Yeah.
and I knew that through her and with her, this would be something else. Plus, every cinematographer wants to do a big film.
Yeah. Yeah. I say this is pretty big.
I've never done a big film. The whole CGI world, there was a huge learning curve there. And I've always said that a cinematographer should be able to film in every genre, whether they like that genre or not. You have to, you have to keep moving forward and keep doing new things and learning new things. And I mean, this was an enormous, like I say, a challenge to understand what this process was.
Yeah, so I imagine your approach is a little different in the sense that I mean, there's more clearly CGI in this than something like 12 Years a Slave. There's things you have to balance. So is the approach vastly different, or does it just take some adjusting, Sean? How does the because this is like a completely, I mean, this is, you know, like you had mentioned, vastly different from anything you've done before.
Hmm.
So I imagine the process changes a bit.
Well, I can only do what I know how to do
Right, right.
and how I do it. But also at the same time, in a film like this, where with this sort of scale, it's in many ways, and this is something that I'd said to myself from the very beginning. Look, these people know what they're doing. They have built these films. They know what it's all about. It's not my job to come in here and try and change everything. I'm a caretaker for this idea.
Right.
My job is to come in and support the director. And what the director's vision is what I'm there to do. And of course, that vision, I can only do things in certain ways. So, there are bits of me that are going to be there, but it's a slightly different process.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but it's fun.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, you do. Well, I try to make every film as fun as I possibly can because that's
Right,
what I do all day, every day.
right.
So being miserable the whole time about it. But the stresses of filmmaking can be enormous. Um, but at the end of the day, this is entertainment,
Yeah, yeah,
and what you want to do is to create awe within the audience, to
yeah,
take them on a journey, to give them an adventure, give them an escape. And what other little ideas that are put into it, you grab hold of those and work with them as best you can.
yeah. And there's so much I want to ask you about this film, but I know I can't because of NDA. But boy, do I want to ask you some questions. I'm gonna end with this question. Did you, Sean? I was trying to find this. Did you direct? There's a Game of Thrones pilot that never aired. Did you shoot that? Were you the cinematographer for that?
Yeah.
Will that ever get released? I mean, that's like people have talked about that forever.
It was an odd thing. HBO didn't like it, and they recast several of the main characters. And so I think in the first episode, there's only 7 minutes of the pilot. And to be honest, I never saw the pilot.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow,
you know,
yes,
I've no idea. So it was a very odd thing, but they were absolutely right, the producers, because what it became was a phenomenon, and it was only through seeing, what they didn't want it to be,
Yeah.
that it became what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it was a great thing to work on. I knew
Yeah.
when I read that first script, so when I read the pilot, I thought, God, and having seen the books, it's like, well, this thing could go on forever if it gets pitched right and captures people's imagination. Then this is going to be huge, and it was, but not
Yeah.
with what we did.
I told you earlier, I'll say it again. I think you have a future here. Sean, thank you so much for giving me all this time. I am such an enormous fan of your work, and I'm so appreciative of your work, Sean.
Well, I appreciate that, and I was glad to give you the time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also connect with Monday Morning Critic on Instagram and Facebook, MDM Critic on Twitter, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. All episodes available, www.mmcpodcast.com.